games. Came out in 2015. It was created by Grant Wiley and Mike Wiley. Excellent game. It's from their Holdfast series, which are pretty easy and are a lot of fun to play. So we're going to just go through this just for my own edification. Got a map of the Korean Peninsula here, and we're going to talk about the Korean War, started in 1950. What essentially happened was we have some South Korean units here and North Korean units here. North Korea was much better militarily than the South Koreans, and they decided to push down past the 38th parallel and try to push the Korean forces off the peninsula so they could unify it into a single country. These were communist forces, these were free forces. What they were able to do was move these forces back until they were finally down here at Busan. There was a small area of South Korea down here that was all that was left. At that point, the UN interceded and pushed the North Korean forces back. This was a very mobile war initially, and they pushed them clear back across the peninsula until they were about up here. At this point, they hit the mountains, and it became harder and harder to remove the entrenched North Korean forces. The one problem that they ran into from the UN and US side was that once they passed this 38th parallel, the Chinese were threatening to add units to support the North Koreans, which they did. And a ton of Chinese soldiers came across the border here from China and began to move the UN forces back, and they moved them back to about here. At that point, the UN forces began to take things pretty seriously and were able to push the Chinese back, and it went back and forth here until it finally kind of ended up at the 38th parallel in 1951. The war lasted another year, or actually it lasted until 53, and during that time there was some small pushback, but essentially this was kind of like a trench war where both sides were just pushing hard and grinding away. In 1953 there was a ceasefire, and the war has never actually been resolved and is still technically a war today, with North Korean forces occasionally pushing against the South Korean forces and vice versa. The terrain of this game is mostly this clear terrain here. It cost 1 movement point to cross clear terrain. Each unit in the game has 6 movement points they can use per turn. Crossing this terrain, there's also mountainous or rough terrain here. Each of these cost 2 movement points to cross. So, in other words, this unit here could cross 2, 4, 6. Actually, that's not a good example because these rail lines, a unit can move freely across during their turn as far as they like. And then there's finally the ocean, and these ocean terrain hexes, you can't cross from here to here, for instance, with this red line in it. These red lines prevent you from crossing ocean sections. You can, however, certain units can use naval capabilities and land on beachheads in various places. These are cities, and cities add a die to the defending unit. When we talk about how battles and combat occur, the defending unit gets an extra die for being in a city. Towns have no effect at all, these little places here. Rivers cost an extra hit point to cross, so let's just say we're going to cross here into here. This would be 1 to cross and 3 to go to rough terrain, so that would be 4 movement points. So this unit could go 1, 2, 3, 4, and then, well, actually they could go anywhere they wanted here because they're on a rail line. So it's important to remember that terrain effects are not cumulative as far as movement occurs, and this gets a little complicated here. So let's just say there's a zone of control around this unit. To go through a zone of control costs 3 movement points, so this unit would go 3, 6, for instance. That would be to keep across each zone of control movement. However, it wouldn't be, since these are 2, it wouldn't be 5. This would be 3, this instead of 5, and then it couldn't move here, so because that would cost another zone of control movement. So don't worry about cumulative movements. The only thing that's going to be cumulative is your rivers. The effects on combat, however, are cumulative. As I said, cities have a +1 die to the defender, and rivers, crossing a river has a -1 die to an attacker. So crossing here would be -1 on a die. The mountain effects on combat, basically these units attack normally, but they can draw from armor support. In the mountains they cannot, so they'd have to use air support to help. And when we talk about combat, that will become a little more clear. Okay, so that's pretty much the board. We've got a Far East command box here. This is where units, reserve units for UN come in. We have a track for the resource points. This is a resource point games. The resources will let you move and attack, and each unit, each side starts with a certain number of resources. There's a box for air, navy, and command supports. These are basically will help your die rolls when you're attacking. And then there's a turn track here that shows when reinforcements come in. Weather track down here during certain months in the wintertime from October through till April. The North Korean player will roll to see what the weather is, and the weather affects air support and movement. The Chinese intercession occurs after UN units cross the 38th parallel. They will have to cross in order to win the game. You have to have units north of the 38th parallel for the UN side, and the North Korean side will have to have units south of the 38th parallel. By the way, this is north over here, this is south here. And dies are rolled each turn to see if the Chinese intercede if these units cross here. Okay, so that's pretty much it for the basics of terrain. We'll get on next to talking about the units. Okay, let's look at each individual unit and what they consist of. There are 5 types of units. There are the Chinese units, there are the North Korean units, both which have the stars, the red stars. The South Korean and UN side, which consists of US Marines. UN units, that's like armies of Australia, Turkey, and the US. And finally the South Korean units. Each side has a number of strength points. The Chinese start with 8, or that's the maximum number they have. The North Koreans have 3 as their maximum hit points. The Marines have 6 as maximum hit points. The UN units have 4, and the South Korean units have 3. You'll notice that South Korean units are by far the weakest units in this game. When you have combat occurring, each side will roll a number of dice, and they'll have to hit basically a 2 hit in order to damage their opponent. The dice roll in combat for the Chinese is 3, so they'll roll 3 dice in combat, and we've got them over here on the combat chart. The South Koreans, or North Koreans, pardon me, will roll 3. The Marines will roll 5. UNs will roll 4, and the South Korean units will roll this lowly 2 down here. So it rolls between 5 and 2, so we could think of it 5 for the Marines, 4 for these guys, 3 for these guys, and 2 for the South Koreans. They then have to hit a target. Basically, they have to surpass the armor class of the target unit, and their armor classes are this target hit number. So basically you have to hit on a Chinese unit, you can hit them on a 5 or 6. Everybody is 5 except for the Marines, which need a 6. So let's see. I think, yeah, the South Koreans are 5. So 5, 5, armor class of 5, 5, and 6. Movement points are 6 for all units. Now, when you have combat occurring, you can add extra dice by giving support. The North doesn't have a great deal of support. Only in the first couple rounds do they have support, but the South can have support throughout the game. There are 3 types. There's naval support, which are basically battleships running off the coast here, and they can support anything that's within 1 hex of the coast. Beyond that, they can't hit anybody. The armor support can be used everywhere except it can't fire into mountain regions. And then air support can be used everywhere, however, it is often limited by the weather. And we saw the little weather thing down here, so the weather track. So during certain months it's going to be too overcast or too snowy for the air support to work. What support does is it adds 2 additional dice to an attack. So each of these would add 2 dice to it. And it's right here with our dice rolled in combat too. None of these have strength points or an armor class, and they can't move, so they're just assigned in combat, and we'll see that in a little bit. So that's what the units look like. Another quick note on support is that support can be used in both offensive and defensive capacities. So you can use it on each one. You keep track of them on this little support block down here. During the first turn, the communist player gets to use some air support and some armor support. After that, they lose those. It's not until the second turn that the South Korean and South side can use support. The other thing is that you can only use 1 support per additional combat. So you can't stack a naval support on top of an armor support or air support. Okay, now we're going to talk about resource points. There's a resource track down here, and each turn, each player gets a certain number of resources. The UN player starts with 6 resource points, and then adds 2 resource points per turn until they reach 16, and 16 is the max they will get. The communist player gets 10 resource points until the Chinese intervention, and at that point they get 15 per turn. So how do resource points work? There's a little table here, and they can be used for all sorts of things. Probably the two most common are to move and to combat. So we'll say this unit here, we want to move it and combat it. So we will apply a resource point for it to move here, and then we can we'll cost that, and then we can use another resource point to actually have it engage in combat. The rules say that you can only either move or combat, but I think it's more interesting to play it where you can do both. You can also combat and move. So this unit could combat here, spending a resource point, and move out. This one could then move in combat and move out, and so on. And that kind of shows the wave tactics that a lot of the Chinese units used in the real war. So that's one thing different. Marine units are a little different. They cost 3, or they activate and combat normally, but when you lose units, let's see, I'll lose a couple steps here. It costs 3 resource points for each step up to get them. And that's the other thing you can do, is you can use resource points to add steps. So basically you're using it to heal hit points. I also use the house rule that units that are in a combat situation or are adjacent in a zone of control of an enemy can only add 1 at a time, so 1 per turn. So they couldn't, say this unit here has down to 1, they couldn't do this. They couldn't add 2 steps to here. The other thing you can do is you can bring units back. If a unit has been destroyed, let's just say this unit got destroyed, you can go up to your little cemetery window here and you can bring them back. They can be brought back in a city or a town if they're South Korean units. Marine units cannot be brought back, and normal UN units, if they come back, would end up down in the box with Japan on it and would have to come through Busan. So that's the other thing you can do with these guys. You can also do naval transfers and assaults. Naval transfer would let you move a unit from one port to another. So let's say this guy's here. So for 2 replacement points, he could move up to Seoul or to Incheon, and they could move to any friendly naval port. Where do people come back? And then the Chinese, if the Chinese were to be eliminated, they would come back up here along the Chinese border town. And Republic of North Korea units, when they're brought back, can come to any city or town on the north side, just like the South Korean units. So that's pretty much it. Also, a naval assault, you can bring these into a naval assault unit, or the Marines you can bring in as a naval assault unit, and they can land in enemy territory. So I let them land anywhere in enemy territory that they could play on. And then the thing about them is they will immediately attack a unit that's adjacent to them, and these will actually combat until one or the other is eliminated. So that's the naval assault rule that I use, and that's about it. Let's see, where do I turn you off at? Oh, escape. So we're showing combat here, and combat in this game is pretty simple. First of all, you have to be adjacent to an opponent to attack. And so we're going to say these two, this Marine Corps and this South Korean unit, are going to attack this North Korean unit here in this city. So what you're going to do is you're going to determine how many dice each side has. So this southern group will have a set of dice for the Marines and for the South Korean units, and then they'll just have dice for the North Korean units. You can add to your dice rolls. You can use your support systems here. So let's just say here we could use a naval support for the Marine unit. And you can only add one per combat, so we can't add a armor support, for example, to this guy. We have to just have those. The support will add two die to the dice roll, and we're going to figure out what the terrain is. The terrain is a city, or a city. So the defending unit will get one dice. So let's just say let's just pull this over here. The unit is going to be a Marine unit, which gets to use 5 dice in combat, and then the South Korean unit will add 2 more dice, and then for 7, and then the naval support will add 2 more for 9. So the southern side will get 9. They'll get the northern side will get a extra dice for being in the city, and it's North Korean, so it will have 3 dice in combat, so 4. So basically 9 to 4. So we're going to roll. We'll just use 3 sets for the north, and they're going to need a 5 or better. So we've got 2 here, or 2 here. We'll just say here. So 2, 3, and that's it. So these will take 3 damage. Let's just go ahead and loose step 1, 2, 3. Now you see that we're going to have to eliminate this unit because it only had 1, and we said this guy had 4 dice, so we'll roll 4 dice for him and a 5. The defender can then choose which unit he wants to, and he's lost 1 here. So we'll just take it from the South Korean steps because you can't get these guys back. And then we'll just eliminate this guy. And that's it to combat. Okay, finally we are going to talk about supply. Supply is one of the harder rules in this to kind of gronk, so we'll try to do it a little bit. You shouldn't have to worry about it too much because the way the game runs, things get kind of static pretty quickly. Basically, supply, you have to be within 3 hexes of a rail line that will lead to your supply provider. For the North Koreans, it's the Chinese. So basically anywhere along the Chinese border needs to be supplied. Let's get this out of the way. For the South, you have to be within you have to be able to trace a rail line to a friendly port city. So if Incheon is your Port City or Pusan. Those will probably be the most likely places. But let's look at this unit here. This is a North Korean unit that's got kind of trapped down here, and he can trace his supply line within 3 hexes to 3 different rail lines: here, here, and here. The problem is that he is in the zone of control of this UN troop right here. Zone of control is each of these adjacent hexes. So he can't use this rail line here, and he can't use the rail line here. He could, however, use the rail line through here, and we could go this way, and this way, and this way, but we've got a South Korean force, so he can't do that. Finally, he could go here, and then he could tap in. Nope, he can't do that. He could go here, though, but it's going to run through that zone of control. Can't go down here. So essentially, this guy is cut off on supply. If they're cut off on supply, they lose a step. And what I do is just do a supply check at the end of every turn. And so that's supply. Also, he uses 1 less die when attacking or defending. Okay, so we're starting turn 1 here. This is how it's starting out. And we're going to start with the communist player. And so the communist player looks like they've got pretty good... everybody's starting at 3, so basically they're just going to start attacking and try to wipe these out. Let's start up here in the north, and we can use our air support. Let's use that while we can. I'll use an air support here on this attack first. There are... these guys each have... how many dice? 3 dice, okay? And they're up against 2 dice from the North Koreans. So this will cost us 1, 2 replacement points, 2 or resource points, pardon me. And I'm going to say, so there's going to be 3, 6, 7, 8. So we need to roll 4 twice and get a 5 or better. So there's 2, 3. Okay, easily wipes this guy out. But he gets to use his 2 first, and he actually does 2 points of damage. So we're going to lose a step here, lose a step here, and send him to the replacement window. I probably shouldn't have used that air support. I should have probably used it for one of these single units, and also we didn't take into effect these 2 river hexes, so we'll do that in the future. Okay, let's figure out this guy. This guy's going to attack here. Again, let's see, he can use 1, he could use 2 against this guy, and then they could move against that way, which isn't a bad idea. Let's see what that river's like. Okay, this is not a river between here, which is good. So that's going to add some dice. There's rivers with this guy, so... This guy's probably going to use some air support, since he's kind of surrounded. And I'm going to use armor support against this... Oh, we're going to use air support against this guy, because this guy's in the mountains. Armor support... Yeah, interesting. Okay, armor support here. We'll move our air support here. See, we're actually left with some issues. Okay, so air support here. Armor support here. We don't have to worry about the weather, I don't think. Yeah, the weather's not. Okay. Who can use the armor support? He can use armor support here. Okay. So he's crossing the river here. We're going to go this guy against this guy. This guy against this guy. This guy against this guy, and this guy against this guy. So we're just basically 1 and 1 and 1. So this probably wasn't the best idea. Yeah. No, I guess these 2 anyway. We should have saved our air support though. Okay, so he's got 3. And with a river, we've got to remember a river is 1. They lose a die. The attacker loses a die. So he's got 3, so he's got 2 now, but you add 2, so he's got 4, and this guy has 2, so it's 4 to 2. So 4, 1 hit, to 2, 1 hit. So he loses 1, he loses 1, okay. He's not attacking across a river. And so he'll use his 3 to 2, but this is 5 to 2 because we got this armor support. So 5, 4, and 1. To 2. Okay, so it didn't work out so well for him. So he'll lose a step. Okay. He's going to go up against mountains. Mountains. No armor support. So that's the only thing with the mountains. So mountains are 3, but there's a river, so 2. 2 to 2. That's going to be 2 to 2, I think. Well, is that a river there? Yeah, that is a river. So 2 to 2. 2 and 2. So nobody does anything there. Here again, a river, 2 to 2. 2 and 2. Okay. Step, and then it's hard to see these, so that's actually not across a river. Oops. So 3 to 2 plus air, so 5 to 2, 4, 1, so 1 point against him to 2, and he is sent to the replacement window. Okay, and that cost us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that's it for our, well, we got 1 left. Let's move. I'm going to move him down here. And that should be the, that's the North Koreans' turn. South Koreans, okay, these guys are going to get completely whooped. So, oh yeah, look at supply, no supply issues, they should all be fine. South, so we're going to end our turn. Okay. North, got 6. Probably they can, first thing we're going to do is we can add 1. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going to toughen those guys up a little bit. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is 1 to attack, so we can make 1 attack. Now those rivers are going to be a problem. So I'm going to attack across here because this is one of the few places that I can. Or here, Yan Yang. I think I'll use a Yan Yang. But that is a village. Okay, villages aren't going to change anything. Let's double check. Villages don't do anything. So, okay. So let's crack across here. He's got 2. He's got 3. 2, 2 and a 5. He hits for 1. And 2 and 1. So this guy loses a step. And we still have an RP. Let's bring this guy up 1. Oh wait, that was our RP was that attack there, so RP 0. Okay. And turn 1 is now over. So we end the turn. And you'll notice that by magic, these guys have moved here. And everybody's here. The Chinese are here. So I'm going to bring this guy across here. It says move is 1. I still have an armor support and an armor support. Who's going to use the armor? Let's push hard against Seoul. There. Make up for those rivers. And can only use one in attack there. So yeah, let's use it down here against this guy. And so there's our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That gives us 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 attacks we can make. And let's do some. Let's up some pieces. We can only use one. 1, 2. And we've got one more left. 3. Okay, there we go. Everybody's is good there. So let's attack here with 3, 6. 3 and 6. I'm gonna piecemeal it. So if I get 6 here, I have a 1 chance of dropping him. 6, 7, 8. Let's hit him hard. 9, 10, 11. 3, 6, 9, 10, 11, but you lose 1, so 10 to 2. 10 to 2, okay. 4, 8, there's 1, 2, 3. Okay, so this guy's going to be eliminated, but he gets his 2 in first, 1 and 1, so send a replacement box, okay. So that's these 3. He's moving across a river, so 2 and 3 is 5. 5 and 2, so 2 is 2, 2. So loose step and loose step and 2. Loose step and loose step. And finally, this guy has 3, 4, 5. 5 against 2, so 5 takes 1. Against 2 takes 2. So the North Koreans aren't doing as well as I thought they would. Okay. Next, we're going to end that turn. So the North Koreans are done for their turn. And we will go with the South Koreans' turn. Now this time they have 8. And they have some air support, and they have these guys. So let's land these guys on Pusan. 24th Division on Pusan lands here. And that's 1 to land them. We're going to give them... Oh, shoot. No, I didn't. I gave these too much. Okay. Let's just add steps. Since they're not in combat or in zones of control, we can add steps to it. Okay, we've got 5 left. You can see how this is starting to get hard. 1, 2, 3, 4. 5. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's it for their turn. And wasted some naval and air support, but that's okay. Let's move on to end the turn. Okay, North Koreans get to go. Oh, and we need to dial 1 for North Koreans. They lost their armor support. Eliminate and eliminate. So we need to eliminate those armor supports. Next, get to figure out what's going on here. They've got 10, so we need to up this guy. He can up to 1. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so there's 3. Okay. 4, and he's going to attack, so 5. Let's see, 1 and 2. Let's just mark him as an attacker. This guy is going to attack. Attack. Okay. One, two, three, and move this guy here. Train mice. Okay. And that'll be 0. So now we can resolve our attacks. So 3 to 2, but cities gonna +1 to the defender. So 3 to 3. Okay. 3, he takes 1, and 3, he takes 1. So lose a step, lose a step. Okay. 3 and 2. 3 and 2. Nobody does anything there. 3 and 2, but there's a river, so 2 and 2. Each one loses a step. Here, 2 and 2. Lose a step. And across here, so 3 and 2, 3 and 2. Lose a step, lose a step, and send a replacement box. Okay. And that's the end of the North Koreans' turn. South Koreans' turn. Let's see. Let's add a step, add a step, add a step. That's 3, 4, add a step. We'll move this guy up. So he's moved. And add a step. Okay, moving these guys into combat. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. And we still have 1. Let's make a 2 to 3 here. Okay. Loses a step, and he loses 2 steps. Okay. And that's going to be it for that turn. Supply looks good. In turn, we'll take a pause for just a second. Okay, so we're in an interesting point here. The technically, the South has won the war because all of these areas with the blue star are occupied. To make it more interesting, let's see how many areas there are. There's Pyongyang there. There is Hungnam, Monpei, and down here, I guess there's nothing down here, so. Okay. And Yangsanjian. So yeah, they've won by occupying those areas. The North could have won by occupying all the ones with red stars here. And the nice thing with the software is, I guess it won't let you do that. But now what would be interesting is say they didn't have all of them. They just had one left. Chinese intervention could occur. And since this is the second turn after the crossing, if a 5 or 6 is rolled, then the Chinese would be able to come in. So let's roll it and see. So there would be a Chinese intervention. So suddenly we've got a bunch of Chinese units here. And the game could be radically different with the Chinese coming in, and they could make things. They would probably end up pushing these units back to the 38th parallel or so. Again, it seems like the 38th parallel, either here or here, are the two choke points. So that's pretty much game. I think it's considered a victory for the UN and South Korean units. So we'll cut it off there. Okay, so we're in an interesting point here. The technically, the South has won the war because all of these areas with the blue star are occupied. To make it more interesting, let's see how many areas there are. There's Pyongyang there. There is Hungnam, Monpei, and down here, I guess there's nothing down here, so. Okay. In Gyeongsanjian. So, yeah, they've won by occupying those areas. The North could have won by occupying all the ones with red stars here. And the nice thing with the software is, I guess it won't let you do that, but now what would be interesting is say they didn't have all of them. They just had one left. Chinese intervention could occur, and since this is the second turn after the crossing, if a 5 or 6 is rolled, then the Chinese would be able to come in. So let's roll it and see. So there would be a Chinese intervention. So suddenly we've got a bunch of Chinese units here, and the game could be radically different with the Chinese coming in, and they could make things. They would probably end up pushing these units back to the 38th parallel or so. Again, it seems like the 30th parallel, either here or here, are the two choke points. So that's pretty much game. I think it's considered a victory for the UN and South Korean units. So we'll cut it off there.